What's a fact everyone believes that's actually false? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. That the US government spent millions designing a pen to work in space, while the Soviets used good old-fashioned common sense with pencils. The space pen was offered by the inventor to NASA gratis to help his marketing, and it solved the issue of pencil lead breaking off and floating around the cabin. Answer. To add to this, both NASA and the Soviet cosmonauts all used pencils, which were both bad in space and very expensive. And the problem was not only the graphite flakes, but even worse, that anything noted was easily smudged to become illegible. The pens from Fisher were thoroughly tested by NASA and purchased by them, and separately also by the Soviets, at a standard bulk discount, $2.39 per pen. Story 2. Movies and TV shows say you have to wait 24 hours to report someone missing. I don't know why they do that. If someone is missing, the sooner you report it, the better. 24 hours would be like a dream to a kidnapper. Answer. The reason is for dramatic effect, to give a reason why normal authorities aren't helpful and the protagonist has to take matters into their own hands. Or it keeps parental characters off screen while the kids are having a magical quest. Whatever the story demands, so that an officer can say, "Sorry, ma'am, there's just nothing we can do," and we can get on to the next story beat. And also, there used to be rules like that, though they varied by state or region. Think back to a time before cell phones, when your missing kid might just be with friends at the mall. Story 3. Cows farting is a significant source of methane, contributing to global warming through mass cattle farming. In fact, cow farts contain very little methane. The methane comes out when the cows burp. Answer. TLDR. Cows are pretty dang bad, okay? Also, a lot of the land needed to have livestock on was once forest or wild habitat for many other things. So it's led to the loss of those individual carbon sinks as a double whammy, clear-cut for growing feed and for the cows themselves, which is very inefficient for the amount of human food a cow makes, versus what could be grown instead of feed-grade soybeans and the like. Growing what is profitable is a logical choice, but if we didn't have all the dang cows, it wouldn't be as profitable to begin with. Producing beef also uses a hell of a lot of water and causes contamination, algae blooms, all kinds of issues in groundwater and rivers. All the land the cows and feed growing take up causes significant loss of mammal, plant, and aquatic biodiversity. Livestock animals make up a large amount of the world's total estimated mass of mammals, while wild mammals do not come close. There's that nasty bacteria, M. bovis, that causes bovine tuberculosis, which can have a low chance of infecting a human. Or CJD. Not a lot of people survive around with that one. Prion disorders are nasty buggers for the most part. All the assorted risks of raw milk and the fact that people can access it as easily as they access a lactating livestock animal and advocate for feeding it to very young children. Some farmers are overusing antibiotics on their animals, which is also going to make all that worse too, much the way humans have done with other superbacteria over the years. The bacteria in question, like E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella, etc., can enter via the milking process because they're standing in the soil it usually hides in all darn day. So without the pasteurization, people are just listening to some random podcaster saying, "Trust me, bruh," about raw milk that's easy to obtain and going to make themselves and their families really sick. Sorry, I really freaking dislike cows for all the reasons above and more. I'm also scared of them and chickens after a childhood petting zoo disaster. Lol. My stance on it has long been that we need to pick one, cows or cars, and heavily reduce our reliance on the other one. No one's ready to talk about that one yet, though. You'd think I slapped their grandma, then stole their wallet by the way people react. I do live in a province that's heavy on the cattle ranching and oil gas, so that reaction is partially my fault too. Story 4. Everyone thinks shocking someone with a defibrillator is done when the heart is stopped, when it's used on a heart that is beating irregular, that people didn't believe Columbus when he said the earth was round. Everyone knew it was round. We've known since the ancient Greeks. Story 5. That our brain is not fully developed until age 25. There is never a point where our brains are done developing. The The study this is taken from simply stopped studying anyone over the age of 25. Story 6. That urine is sterile. It's not. Even the healthiest pee has at least a little bit of bacteria, and most people don't have the healthiest pee. It's really odd to be how much people really to believe this myth. It makes me wonder what they're doing with pee. Answer. People believe it because it's still written in textbooks. My textbook for this semester says the bladder is sterile, and it was published in 2021. I was taught the bladder was sterile in class just 2 weeks ago. The bladder is not sterile. Even if it was, there's simply no way pee could be sterile, considering it has to pass through the urethra and out of the meatus, which has all the normal skin bacteria, to exit the body. That idea came from 1800s science, back when germ theory was just recently accepted as true. Some guy did a test to prove that pee in a special container doesn't grow bacteria the same way that stagnant water does in the same container. Therefore, it's sterile. There weren't that many options for assessing sterility back then, and bladder bacteria does not grow on a normal petri dish because the growth conditions are very different from the conditions of a bladder. So the assumption that pee is sterile wasn't able to be disproved until we developed highly sensitive bacteria culture tests, a way to extract urine directly from the bladder. We definitely did that before 2021. But the textbooks haven't caught up yet. And it's hard to argue with textbooks because I'm an undergrad student. Nobody fudge trusts me, but I'll keep trying. Story 7. I once spent way too long telling grown jerk adults that humans, in fact, use 100 of their brains and that the taste buds do not have specific zones. All taste buds have the same sensations. Answer. In high school, I had a teacher who went out of his way to embarrass me during a class experiment. He was demonstrating the 4 sections of the tongue idea using Q-tips soaked in sour, sweet, bitter, and salty solutions. We were supposed to touch each one to the part of the tongue where that taste was supposedly strongest. I couldn't taste the sour sample at all, just the texture of the cotton. Instead of considering that it might be normal, he got angry and accused me of acting out and trying to ruin the experiment. He even called me to the front of the class and scolded me in front of everyone. And being deeply introverted, I was horrified. I left the room in tears and went straight to the library. When I looked it up, I found out the taste map he was teaching had already been debunked. Story 8. Shaving does not make hair grow back thicker or darker. It just leaves a blunt tip that makes the regrowth feel stubbier and look heavier. Story 9. Chiropractic. Total scam. Guy who started it claimed he healed someone's deafness with a spinal readjustment. Hasn't changed much since. Not recognized by the AMA for a reason. Answer. I had an ex who got into a car wreck and had headaches and thought going to the chiropractor would help it. He claims it did, but says that he was in some of the worst pain of his entire life for a few days following the visit and needs to go continuously to keep up with his back pain since then. He couldn't put it together that he injured himself at the chiropractor. Story 10. No matter how thinly you slice garlic, it will not liquefy in the pan. It will most likely burn and make your sauce bitter. It is better to crush it into cold oil and slowly heat it. Better yet, brush the whole bulb in olive oil and cook it in a ceramic garlic roaster or tin foil. Then smush it into a paste. Answer. Also, Henry Hill, the real guy, is an unreliable narrator. His immunity deal only covered racketeering, or maybe assault at best. If he confessed to takedown, there's no way the FBI would let him skate on that. This is the one glaring flaw of the movie, that they don't address this. What it needs is a scene where the FBI suddenly lets on that they won't let him skate on takedown and tacitly tell him not to confess to any so they can maintain their plausible deniability. Story 11. That lemmings are so stupid that they will run off cliffs just because the lemming ahead of them did. That was propaganda that was created by absolute demons pretending to be human beings using machinery and or other means to push hordes of them off of the cliffs for a video clip. Story 12. Taylor, if you're reading this, I am sorry I insisted old glass got wavy and droopy over time. You were right, and I was too stubborn to admit the process back in the day just produced wavier glass. I'm sorry. Story 13. That a frog can be boiled alive if you raise the temperature of the water very slowly, that it will become accustomed to each new temperature and not jump out. Story 14. That you can tell who is lying based on eye contact. Nope, it's been debunked for like a decade. Now can we please stop using it to judge autistic people? Story 15. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold perpetrated the Columbine school shooting due to jock culture and bullying while they were part of the trench coat mafia. Literally, the only thing true in that sentence is that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold perpetrated the shooting. The media needed a reason and ran with that story. The truth is, we really don't know. We can infer a ton, but it wasn't bullying. It wasn't lashing out at the jocks. It wasn't the group they were never a part of. Answer. One of my favorite required readings from high school was Dave Cullen's Columbine. It's so well written and gives a good picture of how everything played out, but also into the lives of the victims and how the town handled the shooting. But he does a great job of explaining how the media perpetuated these myths and how they were actually fairly normal teens on the surface. Story 16. That cat's favorite drink is milk. They generally can as kittens when nursing, but adults are lactose intolerant. Story 17. I've scrolled too far to not see this one. Daddy longlegs are not venomous. They don't even have fangs. They are also not spiders. Story 18. Drinking distilled water is good for you. It isn't. It is actually bad to drink a lot of distilled water. Answer. Our water dispenser at work broke a few years ago during the summer, and our boss just put a bunch of distilled water jugs in the break room for us, because we already had them on hand. It took a lot of pushback from everyone for her to finally give in and buy regular drinking water for us. Most of us would sweat our jerk off every day there, and we were all concerned about making things worse by chugging distilled water. Story 19. That races exist. They do not. There is no scientific basis for defining different human races. The overwhelming consensus in modern science is that race is a social construct, not a biological reality. Decades of genetic research have consistently shown that humans cannot be divided into distinct, meaningful biological races or subspecies. Story 20. Columbus discovered America, and that he went on his voyage to prove the world was round. I know, those are two facts. Answer. The definition of discovery implies bringing the thing back to your country of reference. If I am shipwrecked on a deserted and uncharted island, I cannot say I have discovered it until I can return home to tell others where it is. Many peoples arrived in America before Columbus, but they all stopped there. In the literal sense of the term, it was Columbus who discovered America. Story 21. People believe that they only use 10 of their brains, and that the brain is split down the middle, and you're either left-brained or right-brained. I don't know about y'all, but I use 100 of my brain. The left and the right work together. Story 22. That knowing right from wrong is basic common knowledge. Considering the number of personal and legal arguments related to morality, knowing what is right is not always so clear. Story 23. Jesus Christ's actual story was meticulously recorded, and that its many translations are perfectly viable as a reference document for modern moral values. Story 24. That ancient ships were rowed by slaves. In rare cases it happened, but most of the time the crews were free, paid soldiers. Once your ship lodged the ram in your enemy, if you had a free crew, then they'd be able to storm the ship. If you had slaves to manage, you'd be at a huge disadvantage. Slaves were only really used as oarsmen with the advent of centerline rudders, minimizing the need for skillful seamanship on the rower's part. Cannons as the main weapon of battle, rendering ramming obsolete, and a scalaccio rowing, multiple people per oar, simplifying the technique further. Story 25. That gentle parenting has any research behind it at all. Before working as an author, Ockwell Smith worked as a homeopath, doula, and hypnobirthing teacher. This is the founder's background leading up to her book about it. Story 26. You do not need to drink 8 cups of water a day. This was a scam by sport drink companies to sell more product. Answer. Way too much over-the-top hype about chugging a ton of water out there. Besides, a 100 pounds person living a very passive lifestyle can have a much smaller need for liquid compared to a 240 pounds person doing heavy physical labor in hot environments or dry AC air. The best advice I've seen is to follow your pee color. If it's murky, drink more. If it's like water, your body is desperately trying to get rid of an excess. It tells you something, that in some languages the term is hydration balance, not well hydrated, which insinuates that the more the better. Story 27. That there's a quote-unquote heartbeat at 6 weeks. It's all bullshit, and the medical profession encourages the delusion. The smooth muscle needed to actually make the heart, quote, beat and work isn't formed until week 20-21. Story 28. The modern idea of the Illuminati was created by science fiction author Robert Anton Wilson. He and a few of his buddies were editors of prominent journals and magazines. They snuck in small articles and letters to the editors talking about the Illuminati to see if they could put it into the public consciousness. It was one big troll that took hold and became a thing. Story 29. Hugo Boss designed the SS uniform. It was designed by Himmler, and Hugo Boss had the contract to make them. Story 30. If a shark attacks, you can remind it that people are more likely to die from car accidents and that it's just curious about your taste. Story 31. A factoid isn't a fact. Factoids are the responses in this post, an item of unreliable information that is reported and repeated so often that it becomes accepted as fact. Story 32. The definition of insanity is not doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Story 33. People believe that having a red car will increase your insurance rates. Color of a car has zero effect on your premiums. Story 34. Being taller is better. In fact, being average or short is better. Your life expectancy greatly decreases for every standard deviation over average. Answer. Not only do taller people get more cancer, more cells, more chances for errors, but a 6'8" friend died when his aorta just kind of split open. In taller people, just have weaker aortic walls, on top of having to fight more gravity when pumping blood, and he just kind of slumped over his desk 5 minutes after hopping off games for the night. Nothing could have been done even if this happened right in front of a team of God-tier surgeons. He was 29 and was literally, unironically, the guy who never had an enemy in the world and who everyone loved. And he died from being too tall. Story 35. That undocumented immigrants commit more crime than native-born U.S. citizens. They don't. Even people on the left believe it, despite being debunked again and again. Story 36. Asian beetles are not ladybugs. They are. There are many different species in the lady beetle family. The seven-spotted ladybug, which is the one most people think of, and the Asian lady beetle are both just different species of lady beetles. They are both invasive to the United States, and both of them can bite if they feel threatened. Story 37. I got some substances ones. People used to say that using ecstasy would cause literal holes in your brain. This myth got so bad that they actually started charging dealers with attempted manslaughter just for selling those pills. In extreme cases, every pill was a separate attempted manslaughter charge. People also used to think that anyone who used heroin once would be addicted for life. Currently, people think that you can overdose on fentanyl simply by touching it. I know we have all seen the videos of police collapsing after coming in contact with the substances. People will still swear up and down that it is true. Police, news, and random citizens believe this absolutely. Basically, everyone except medical professionals and chemists. But let's just think logically about this. Where do substances addicts get high? Parks, public benches, public bathrooms, buses, trains, etc. If it was real, people would be dropping left and right, and nobody would know why until they run a tox screen. But every instance of this happening, the person who drops knows that they were in contact with the substances. What other substances that people smoke or shoot up can be absorbed through the skin, causing people to overdose? None. Even fentanyl patches have to be engineered to be absorbed through the skin. They have to alter the substances to make that happen. Answer. Even fentanyl patches have to be engineered to be absorbed through the skin. Fentanyl can be absorbed through the skin, but the absorption rate isn't exactly high. It is a relatively low risk outside of actually working with fentanyl in mass quantities. Inhalation of fentanyl is a significantly higher risk factor and is far more likely to eliminate you. Story 38. Trickle-down economics. The most damaging thing in the current day because us allowed so many other things to happen, starting with deregulation. Story 39. Not blow-drying your hair is not going to get you sick. Catching a cold comes from viruses, not wet hair. Story 40. We only use 10 of our brains. This one is everywhere. It's the plot of half the sci-fi movies out there. The idea that we have this vast, untapped reservoir of genius and psychic potential just sitting idle. But it's total nonsense. Think about it for a second. If 90 of your brain was just useless jelly, why would a tiny stroke or a head injury in the wrong part be so catastrophic? Brain scan technology, like fMRIs, shows us clearly that there are no dark silent areas. Even when you're daydreaming or sleeping, your brain is buzzing with activity. Simple tasks like talking or lifting a cup of coffee light up dozens of different areas working together. Your brain is a ridiculously energy-intensive organ. It would never have evolved to be 90 useless. Story 41. If you place a frog in boiling water, it will hop out. But if you increase the temperature slowly enough, it will boil alive. It's a useful analogy, which is why it sticks around, but it's not true. Disproven by experimental evidence and by common sense. Frogs are ectotherms. Their entire life is defined by carefully monitoring their body temperature and moving around to keep it within a strictly defined range. It would be nonsense to imagine this would work. Story 42. There is a fact that human blood vessels can circle the earth if fully spread. This is proof false by a YouTuber. Story 43. Kids should turn forward-facing once their feet can touch the seat back. Or their knees are in their face. That can't be safe. Broken legs are actually more common forward-facing. The vast majority of crashes involve a frontal component, and so the kids' legs kick out and hit the seat back in front of them. When rear-facing, they draw up into the shell, and although they might hit the seat back upon rebound, most of the crash energy is gone by that point. In fact, in almost all of the very few cases of broken legs in rear-facing kids that I'm aware of, there was a fatality in the vehicle. The recommendation to remain rear-facing until the child's convertible car seat is outgrown by height or weight is intended to protect the child's head, neck, and spine. Those are more vulnerable than a leg and a whole lot harder to fix. Story 44. The idea that races of humans is based on biology. That is wrong. There is no biology basis for human race. It is a social construct. Answer. People show a strong tendency to resemble their ancient ancestors, whose appearance was greatly influenced by environmental conditions where they lived. So why do people resemble their ancient ancestors? Genetics, which is as scientific a biological basis as much as anything is. Is this what people refer to as race? Perhaps, although there is little agreement on this. Story 45. The Great Wall of China is visible from space with the naked eye is false. It's actually too narrow and blends in with the landscape. Story 46. The plural of octopus being octopi. While it sounds correct, it's only accepted because of its widespread usage. But since octopus is Greek, the Latin plural is completely wrong. Octopodes is the Greek plural, but the widely accepted English plural is actually octopuses. Story 47. Lactic acid making your muscles sore. We've known as free hydrogen ions for a few decades, but I still hear even professionals mistaking it. Story 48. That people get busted for downloading movies and music, or that you risk getting busted for downloading. If you ever are able to read the details of the case, invariably the person is being sued for unauthorized distribution. They're in trouble for uploading, not for downloading. It's not that they downloaded 20,000 songs. It's that they uploaded one song to 20,000 other people. Now, they may view that as a trivial difference because they think that their uploading is incidental to their downloading, and that one song was one of the ones they downloaded. And it's expedient to the media reporting it for people to believe that, as it has a material interest in copyright. But legally, it's not. If you set your P2P client to not upload at all, you will not get busted for downloading. Story 49. That there are no mosquitoes on Iceland. Sad but true. Icelandic mosquitoes have been identified for the first time, roughly last week. Story 50. Put a sock in the mouth of someone having a seizure. Not only will you risk your fingers getting bitten off, biting your tongue off is pretty much impossible during a seizure. At worst, you might bite your tongue and have some bleeding bruising. Also, if you put your dirty socks in my mouth while I am losing brain cells, I will end you the second I wake up. Story 51. Urine is sterile. It was recently proven false when researchers discovered a microbiome in our bladder. Story 52. Pee comes out sterile. Every couple months, I have to reconvince my mom that yes, her high school science teacher was lying to her when he said that piss is sterile when coming out of the body. And no, if your organs are hanging out of you and you need to keep them wet, you can pee on them because it's sterile. She also seems to keep forgetting my point that if your organs are hanging out of you, it's going to be very difficult to pee on them. As a woman anyway, I can't speak for you guys out there. I wish I was kidding, but every few months she somehow brings this up again, and I physically and mentally facepalm, and I'm just like, here we go again. Story 53. About Columbus. We are told in school that in a storm, the wind blew him off route and he just stumbled on America. But there are legit historians claiming that Columbus knew that there was land there. Regarding to the historians, there is documentation that fishermen already knew, had been there and told Columbus. Columbus wanted to find it out for himself. Story 54. That there can be an end to corruption. Power straightaway corrupts people, however honest they may be before that. Story 55. Snakes don't unhinge their jaws to swallow food. Have you ever dislocated your jaw? It's pretty painful. Snakes have a jaw that can stretch the swallow food whole. At no point is it dislocated though. Also, poison and venom are not interchangeable. Poison is something that becomes harmful when eaten or absorbed through the skin. Venom is harmful when injected. Cobra venom is routinely eaten in a number of East Asian countries without eliminating people. Story 56. That liking games, toys, or generally fun stuff is childish. I don't know what people live for, but I surely don't live to work. Work is a mean for survival, not the goal in life. You are not childish just because you don't treat work or career as something big and virtuous. You may watch Tom Jerry, play Super Mario Brothers, or even do some dumb stuff, because why would you want to be sad? People are so stiff and serious. Story 57. That an old lady scammed McDonald's out of millions because she spilled her coffee. The woman had third-degree burns because McDonald's kept their coffee at boiling point because they had data that said they sold more when it was that hot. They had been warned multiple times, and others had been hurt when the boiling coffee spilled on people's clothing, soaked in, and severely burned them. At the time, most commercial coffee was kept at a much lower temperature, so consumers did not know how dangerous it was. The jury was so angry at McDonald's for painting an old woman who had third-degree burns from their product as a scammer. They awarded her millions she didn't ask for. Story 58. Bats are blind. Bulls dislike the color red. Lemmings commit mass tragic. End. Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake." Napoleon was short. Salem witches were burned at the stake. The biblical forbidden fruit was an apple. The tongue has different zones for taste. Vikings wore horned helmets. We only use 10 of our brains. Story 59. The frontal lobe fully develops at 25 years old. The study that people base this off of didn't have any participants older than 25, so it merely shows that the frontal lobe develops significantly with age. Everyone develops it at a different rate though, depending on their life experiences and genetics. Story 60. Cold temperatures cause illness. It may make one more susceptible to illness, but it's not the cause. Story 61. That the sky is blue. The sky actually has no color. What you're seeing is an effect called Rayleigh scattering, which is the scattering of light by air molecules. When sunlight reaches Earth's atmosphere, shorter wavelengths of light, such as blue light, are scattered more than longer wavelengths, which means that we see a blue sky most of the time. Story 62. This is kind of an interesting question because the most accurate answers have no chance of being top answers. Story 63. That goldfish have 3-second memories. They don't, but we keep repeating it so confidently that goldfish probably believe it about themselves at this point. Story 64. That the banana that banana flavoring is based on is extinct. It's still around, just not able to be grown in large quantities. Story 65. That off-brands are the same as name brands because they're made in the same factory. Contract manufacturing and co-packing do not remotely mean it's the same product. There are different recipes and quality standards for each product being made, and very often different lines for each SKU coming out of a plant. Off-brand cereal tastes different because it is different. Story 66. That AI is a problem because it's stealing people's jobs. Yes, if companies replace employees with incompetent AI and that makes their goods and services suck, then that's horrible. But AI is just one more in a long line of tools humans have invented to make doing things require less human labor. It used to be every last human was a hunter-gatherer. Then we invented axes to split bones to eat the marrow, and farming, and we needed less farmers. By the 1800s, only 80 of people were farmers. Then tractors and harvesters were invented, and now very few people are farmers. Should we get rid of those because they took all the farming jobs? If people can't pay their bills or afford groceries because they were replaced by AI, then someone very rich is pocketing the money that would have been paid to them and still could be. The wealth created by those productivity gains is being hoarded instead of shared. The problem isn't AI, it's capitalism, or more specifically, Who gets the profits from automation? Story 67. That everyone is denied Social Security disability on their first attempt, or that everyone is accepted on their first try. The people deciding actually work really hard to come to an intelligent decision. Story 68. The programming that's been imprinted in our minds by the state to control the population by making us believe that we are powerless. Depression is not a sign of a disease, yet a wake-up call to do something differently. And instead of helping people to come to that understanding, they try to give you pills to suppress it. Many people actually believes it helps. Story 69. That there are only two sexes in humans. Middle school biology may touch upon XX and XY chromosomes, but there's so much more diversity happening. Even trying to list them will inevitably mean I'm leaving things out because, although I have a rough understanding, biology is fudge wild. Story 70. That holding your breath will slow down your ejaculate velocity. Common belief, but not entirely true. Story 71. This is a very specific thing to my hometown that everyone seemingly believes until they find out otherwise. But Cambridge's famous mathematical bridge was not created by Isaac Newton, and certainly not without the use of nuts and bolts. The reality is, the bridge was designed by William Etheridge and constructed by James Essex, 22 years after Newton died. It does contain nuts and bolts as part of the design, but are not really visible if you view the bridge. Isaac Newton was extraordinary for his accomplishments, but this famous bridge was not one of them. Story 72. That carrots don't actually contribute to healthy night vision. It's totally false. They do. Anything with dash carotene contributes to healthy night vision. What carrots don't do is give you supernatural radar vision. That was wartime propaganda. But people somehow forget that part and instead retain the false conclusion that therefore carrots or carotene must have no impact on vision at all. Also, the Mandela effect. There really was a prominent South African anti-apartheid activist who died in the late 1970s in police custody. It just wasn't Nelson Mandela. It was Steve Biko. People sometimes mix the two of them up and misremember that it was Mandela, not Biko, who died. But that's all it is, just mixing up two real, actual life stories of two different, real, actual people. It's not some repressed memory of a trans-dimensional collective unconscious. What's creepy about it is that the apartheid government worked hard to erase all traces of both men. And so, in a sense, all the Mandela effect stuff is really doing the work of the old apartheid regime long after it is gone, like a zombie that won't stay dead. Story 73. You get a nuclear explosion when you split a single atom core. If the atom core is too small, smaller than iron, it consumes energy instead of releasing energy upon splitting. But even if you split a heavy core like uranium or plutonium, the energy released is far too low to be noticed. A nuclear reaction may be 1,000,000 times stronger than a normal reaction. But if you know that the number of atoms in 1 g of uranium has about 21 zeros, then you see why a single splitting is like nothing. The key to a nuclear explosion is the chain reaction, so that not only one but every atom is split. Then you can release the 1,000,000 times more energy compared to the same mass in normal explosives. Story 74. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean it's objectively bad. I have things I don't like for no reason other than I just don't like them. Story 75. Pterodactyls are not dinosaurs. There is no, actually, or, well, they were around with dinosaurs. To this, they are not dinosaurs. They are their own separate thing called pterosaur, and they are cool AF. Story 76. That the First Amendment means you can say whatever you want, wherever you want, without repercussions. In fact, it only applies to the federal government, meaning it's the government that can't impede your free speech. Private business and properties don't have a First Amendment for you. They're free to regulate you in accordance with state laws, city ordinances, etc. Story 77. I love geography, so here is my attempt to clear up any misconceptions. Greenland is a lot smaller in size than most people think. Russia's landmass could fit inside of the continent of Africa. The Mercator projection map can lead people to believe that countries near the poles are much larger than they actually are, which creates a distorted view of global landmass sizes. Story 78. That America was founded on X. X being things like religious freedom, freedom to own a gun for self-defense, free market capitalism, etc. The answer is either no or way more complicated than just yes or no, or illegal federally, but the states could and did do X. Story 79, that most of your body heat is lost through your head. It's a total myth. You lose heat evenly across any exposed skin. It sounds smart, but it's just not true. Story 80, that the Earth's mantle is molten like lava. It is very hot and does move into form like a fluid over geological timescales, but it is still very much solid. It is only in certain conditions, such as near the surface, where the pressure is reduced, that it becomes molten. Story 81, that the real saying is, the blood of the covenant, etc., etc. So many people repeating it earnestly on here whenever the phrase is mentioned, blood is thicker than water. The original saying has been around for centuries. The covenant idea is an internet retcon. Story 82, that you can absolutely pull yourself up by your bootstraps. There's a reason why that, back in the day, that used to be an insult. Story 83. Luther did absolutely not nail his 95 Theses on the door of the church in Wittenberg. We always knew that was not true, but it's still one of the pillars of history class in all schools, at least in my country. Story 84. A common misconception about medieval fortifications is that circular staircases were always built clockwise, as that favored the defender attacking down over the attacker attacking up. First off, not true. Plenty of stairs going both ways. Second, it didn't favor either side. If the stairs were narrow enough for the central column to get in the way of the attacker's strikes, they were also narrow enough for the outer wall to get in the way of defenders' strikes. Third, and most importantly, no one was going to bother designing stairs specifically for that purpose. Fortifications were generally intended to hold off vastly stronger forces. Side note, no, castles weren't usually stormed, as we often see in movies and games. Unless you were in real hurry and had massive number advantage, it was far better and safer to surround the castle, then wait for the defenders to run out of supplies and surrender. By keeping them behind a wall, ideally more than one, and with approach going through multiple eliminate zones, if the enemy got anywhere close to any stairs they could be fought on, it usually meant you already lost. Story 85. I don't think spiders want to crawl in your mouth while you're asleep. Worms in your balloon knot are a thing, though. Story 86. In the West, the water you drink is nice and clean. No, it has microplastics in it. Almost all water on the planet is contaminated with it. Story 87. Just watched a video from Kurzgesagt about fake facts. The example was that all our blood vessels combined have a length of 100,000 kilometers or 60,000 miles. Took them a whole year to debunk that 100-year-old wrong information that was as a given fact in multiple medicine books. Story 88. Toilet and sink water flows in two different directions depending on the hemisphere of the Earth you are in. In reality, this is false, and the rotation depends exclusively on irregularities in the surface of the container and on the direction in which the water was moving before being discharged. The masses of water in our bathrooms are not large enough to experience the Coriolis effect in a significant and visible way. Story 89. Hot water freezes faster than cold. No, it doesn't. Yes, there is an accidental discovery using some lab equipment that occasionally leads to this happening, but tests of the method yield only a 50-50 chance of reoccurrence. So it remains a fluke that isn't fully understood, and it's not doable at home or outside in natural weather. In your freezer at home while making ice? Never. Not once. Physically impossible. Story 90. That the majority or all of the world's coal deposits were formed in the Carboniferous period, explicitly because trees use lignin and bacteria fungi that process lignin hasn't evolved yet, so the dead trees just kept piling up for miles. It's one of those neat factoids people tend to remember because it makes them feel smart and sounds super fascinating. But it's been disproven for almost a decade now. At least this was actually a credible scientific theory originally, so believing it wasn't wrong originally. It's just incredibly outdated now. Story 91. Everyone always conflates triangulation with trilateration. It's rampant on TV shows especially. Triangulation gives you two possible locations. You can often eliminate one by applying practical overlay, but it doesn't just pinpoint exactly where someone or their telephone is. It tells you how far it is from 2 points, which could be in any direction, i.e., could be 5 kilometers north of both points or 5 kilometers south of them. Trilateration uses a third fixed point to actually pinpoint something. That's where you get a very precise location. Story 92. That active investing or professional stock pickers can beat the market. Warren Buffett debunked that years ago. Story 93. Modern Western world has roots in ancient Greek and Rome. The true is the leading Western side are all Anglo-Germanics, which are not descendants of Greeks or Romans. In fact, they were enemies. This is as crazy as if Mongols claimed they have Chinese roots. The best you can say is they were culturally influenced, conquered. Story 94. Daylight savings time was created to help farmers school children. It was created to save fuel during the world wars. Story 95. That bats are blind. Totally false. Bats can see quite well. They just rely on echolocation more. Story 96. That if you drop any electronic device in water, you should put it in rice. It doesn't help. It makes it worse. Story 97. Food supplements such as vitamins, hormones, and antioxidants make you healthy. The opposite is true. Research has shown that supplements are dangerous. Antioxidants increase the risk of cancer, for example, and testosterone supplements cause heart disease. Some vitamins are poisonous as supplements and cause cancer, kidney stones, and liver disease. Get your vitamins from food and only take supplements when they are prescribed by a good doctor. Why are they sold without a prescription if they are dangerous? They are controlled as food, not as pharmaceuticals. This is why grocery stores sell vitamins. Story 98. Prayers can make the difference between living and dying. If it's God's will, then it will happen in spite of prayers. Story 99. Someone I work with confidently said last week that cutting a worm in half creates 2 worms. Poor things. Answer. I think it's because many people early in life learn that worms have 2 heads and 2 hearts. So we are literally taught that they can survive at either end. What we aren't taught most of the time is that they don't work at the same exact time, and that they actually have more hearts but they work differently than what we learn, and that technically they don't have 2 heads. Story 100. Catching a could had nothing to do with the temperature. Temperature has no correlation to becoming sick. Also, being in the rain or otherwise wet also does result in you becoming sick. Also, cold feet doesn't make you sick. All these don't affect the immune system in any way. Story 101. Leg hair was ever a problem for women. Nobody cared until Gillette realized they weren't bleeding everyone sufficiently dry, so they made up a problem and marketed it as women's razors. Story 102. The cost of living in most Western nations are in a crisis mode, meaning temporary strain. Dislike to tell you, but it's the new norm. Story 103. Earth isn't round. Aside for the surface irregularities, it's slightly oval because it spins. The difference is, however, very small, approximate 20 kilometers of difference for a 6,370 kilometers radius. Approx. Earth's orbit is an ellipse, sure, but it's way exaggerated when drawn in the books. The eccentricity is 0.0167. It's almost perfectly round. The distance between the 2 foci is approx 7 solar radii. If one focus is in the center of the sun, the other is only 3 suns away. Earth doesn't orbit the sun, not exactly. However insignificant this may be, technically the sun and Earth orbit their common center of mass. The barycenter of the Earth-Sun system mathematically falls deep within the sun itself, close to the center, but not exactly in the center. On average, the closest planet to Earth are not Mars or Venus, our quote-unquote neighbors. It's Mercury. Mercury is also, on average, the closest planet to every other planet in our system. It's because Mercury is the closest to the sun, having the smallest orbit. Story 104. Your car has a blind spot. If you set your side mirrors correctly, it won't unless the rearview mirror is blocked. Story 105. Putting foil in the microwave will destroy it. Edit. I mean, it's safe if done with a bit of caution. Putting a ball of foil in by itself isn't good. Story 106. The Earth orbits the Sun. Edit. I'm being downvoted, but this actually false, you dimwits. XD. The Earth and Sun orbit a common point called the barycenter, but the mass difference is so large that the barycenter of the 2 bodies lies within the Sun itself. Story 107. How big a list you want? These are all 100 false, but widely believed. Epstein was takedown. Professional, freelance hitmen are a real thing. People fight for real using things like kung fu. Americans have always been heavily armed. Everybody in the so-called Wild West walked around with a 6-shooter on their hip. In fact, few people owned pistols, and in most towns, carrying weapon in town limits was illegal. Wild West quick-draw pistol duels were a real thing. Nikola Tesla was a transformative genius who invented much of 20th century technology. Story 108. Don't know if everyone believes this, but a whole lot of people do, that the Earth is so perfectly placed that if it were 1 foot closer to the sun or 1 foot further away, we'd all die. The distance between the Earth and the sun changes all year round, and the Goldilocks zone is massive. You could move the Earth tens of thousands of miles in any direction, and we'd still be just fine. What's more, the Earth is actually moving further away from the sun every year, by a few centimeters. As the sun slowly loses mass, its grip on us gets weaker. So eventually, the Earth will drift out of the Goldilocks zone. Then, we all die. Story 109. iPhones are overpriced. They are actually the most appropriately priced flagship smartphones in the market right now. Story 110. Crossing your arms always means the person is closed off and hostile. In reality, it varies from person to person. Body language isn't a standard language. For example, my crossing my arms means that I'm relaxed and calm. Story 111. That women are designed to give birth. Some can, not all of them. Historically, many have lost their lives during the process, especially at the time where people didn't have to go hunt anymore. And many of them aren't even designed to give birth naturally. Their hips are not wide enough, for example. Also, nowadays, many of them need medical support of some kind during birth. Many cultures are not ready to hear this because for them, a woman is just a birth-giving machine and nothing else. Story 112. Everyone believes chiropractors are a joke, but I have had 2 miracle workers in my life. My first chiropractor helped me walk again after I was bedridden for 2 months. And when he retired and I moved to Houston, I found a sports chiropractor who has been instrumental in my recovery after giving birth. I don't care how many downvotes I get. A good chiropractor is worth more than their weight in gold to me. Story 113. That Israel is a state in the Levante. Israel is a folk of people consisting of 12 tribes. Tribe Judah, the Jews, is only one of them. The dwelling place of the Jews in ancient times was called Judea, or Kingdom of Judah. Remember New Think from George Orwell's book, 1984? Same thing happened here. The state in the Levante is falsely labeled as Israel. So what is this state? A colony of the Three Reich, founded in a settlement endeavor called Havara Agreement. The symbol in its flag is also falsely called Star of David. There is no Star of David mentioned in the Bible, not one single time. This symbol is called Seal of Solomon, but it is actually older than Solomon. It has its roots in mysticism practiced in Babylon. In the Three Reich, those who did not want to settle in the Levante were branded with it. Story 114. I've seen a ton of people say that 60 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, which if you think about it for more than 10 seconds, is obviously true. Story 115. That Caesar was a Roman emperor. He wasn't. Was a consul, a dictator, but he never was an emperor. In fact, the Roman title, imperator, itself doesn't even have the same meaning as today. It designed a victorious general, nothing else. Story 116. That Eskimo is slur. It is not. Only mildly offensive to people in the Eastern Arctic. German people eat raw pork. Does anyone call them Eskimos? Story 117. America is a democracy, and I don't mean on the republic technicality way. Fudge America. Boycott America. Fudge isn't real. Boycott Israel. Story 118. In the West, our biggest delusion is that there is no supernatural. God, saints, angels, demons, they are all very real and have more influence on us than we even begin to fathom. Story 119. That you can shock, defibrillate, a flatlined, asystole person. Basically, you can't Alt-delete a heart with no electrical activity. Story 120. You don't eat, on average, 8 spiders while you sleep. This was actually an example used in a magazine article in 1993 about how people will believe whatever they read is fact. Ironic. Answer. Even more ironic. What you're saying isn't true. The magazine from 1993 thing is itself probably an internet hoax. The magazine from 1993 is generally quoted, i.e., by Snopes, as being PC professional. However, no magazine by that name has ever existed. The supposed author of the article has never written anything else, and no one can find anything about them. The name of the author of the article is an anagram for This is a big troll. There's extensive discussion of sources relevant to this here. That said, one of the answers on that forum does mention a 1992 article, very different from the off-cited 1993 article, and not having anything to do with gullibility on the internet, which does mention the myth. It's unclear if that's really the source of it, however. Story 121, that prehistoric people died of old age at age 40. Nope. It's just that the average age was drastically pulled down by childbirth, fatality, and other things we can prevent today with medical care. Story 122, that during medieval times up until Columbus sailed to America, people would believe that the earth was flat. No, they absolutely did not. People in the West have known since antiquity that the earth was a sphere. Eratosthenes of Cyrene calculated the Earth's circumference within an error of less than 2 of its actual size. This knowledge wasn't forgot during the Dark Ages, certainly not by the educated classes like the Catholic Church, and not among many peasants either. In fact, church teachings said that Jerusalem was at the center of the world, and at the exact opposite of the globe was the mountain of purgatory. Anyone reading Dante's The Divine Comedy from the early 14th century will notice that. Answer: yes, and Columbus wasn't trying to prove the world was round either. He was trying to prove how big around it was. What I have read is that he misunderstood Eratosthenes. I'm sure he wasn't the only one, and thought the world was smaller than it is, and that's why he thought he could reach Asia by sailing west. It's very fortunate for him that the Americas happened to exist, or else he and his men would have died in the middle of the ocean, still far away from their goal. Story 123. Astronomer here. Black holes do not suck in matter any more than any object of that mass would. For example, if the sun right now were to collapse into a black hole, the black hole sun would be just 3 kilometers across, 1.8 miles. But with the same mass, absolutely nothing would happen to the Earth's orbit around it. The reason black holes are wild is because the mass is so concentrated that if you get too close, there is an horizon, that if you pass it, even light cannot escape it. They also just have really strong tidal forces because of their mass sometimes being so large, potentially millions of times that of the sun, which is very cool in its own, but isn't like they're a vacuum cleaner sucking everything up around them. Edit. I should note explicitly that our sun will not ever become a black hole, even at the end of its life, because it is not massive enough. I just said it here as a thought exercise to explain the concept. Story 124. That lie detector tests actually work. It measures when you are nervous, not when you are lying. I'm pretty sure some people actually do believe it works, and others just kind of go along with it. But when TV shows use it as a plot device, I get really annoyed. Like, Toph from Avatar can't feel your lies. She feels your emotions, which are a completely separate thing. It's fun to see YouTubers do it though, because they get nervous and now evidence of them thinking embarrassing or rude things is on the internet forever, edited for grammar mistakes. Answer: there's a reason that so many psychopaths are able to beat polygraph tests, because they genuinely believe they're smarter than the police and won't get caught. They have no reason to be nervous and will pass with flying colors. But you know who will be really nervous? An innocent person who is scared to passing that a machine is going to send them to prison, because law enforcement treats the results as gospel truth and will shape their entire investigation around them. There's a reason they're not admissible in court, and they need to be outlawed altogether. They're garbage. Story 125. You can drink coconut water to survive long term. While you can drink coconut water, you can't only drink coconut water. You'll get diarrhea and die of dehydration quicker. Story 126. Friggin' carrots for eyesight, extra ribs for women, Napoleon being short, swimming dangerous after eating. That's all from my immediate cache. Story 127. That blood in your body is blue when it's depleted of oxygen, which is why your veins look blue. Nope. Answer: holy frick, I had to argue this against my whole class once. Even the teacher was against me. I told them that blood is always red because when full of oxygen, it's just brighter red than when deoxygenated, in which case it's more of a maroon color. Your veins, however, are not inherently blue. They appear that way because of the way skin and fat absorb light, which allows mostly only blue wavelengths to pass through, resulting in blood vessels that appear to be blue or bluish. The thickness of the vein also plays a bit of a role as to what shade they appear through the skin. Otherwise, veins themselves are the same color as arteries, which is kind of a dirty brownish color. Well, their argument was, I probably made that up to prove them wrong, and it's blue because it looks like it. I don't like people. Story 128, Let Them Eat Cake, or Qu'il mange de la brioche, is still attributed to Marie Antoinette, but there is no reliable record of her having said that phrase. Answer: Marie Antoinette totally gets a bad rap. She was a scapegoat for an inherently flawed system. If anyone is to blame for the French Revolution, it would have to be Louis XIV, who made France an absolute monarchy and implement the crazy spending and tax policy that drove them into debt. Also, the phrase was first published when she was 7, so even if she did say it, she would have been quoting someone else. Story 129. The amount of iron in spinach. There was a misprint in the iron amount in spinach decades ago, and people still believe it. Story 130. That just being in space is enough to make you weightless. As in, just get far enough away from the Earth's surface, and all of a sudden, you float instead of fall. Reality. Gravity never ends. If it were possible to build a skyscraper as tall as the space station's orbit, you could take an elevator up to the top floor and stand there, weighing almost as much as you do standing on the surface. The reason that space station astronauts are weightless is not because they're in space, but because they're falling, and the station is falling with them at the same velocity. Orbit means you're falling back towards the Earth's surface, but you have enough horizontal velocity that the surface is curving away from you as you fall. Therefore, you can never land. Story 131. House centipedes are dangerous to humans. Actually, quite the opposite. They eat bugs in your home, form ants, cockroaches to bed bugs. They are usually afraid of people and run from any big movements, and are generally clean, as after they eat, they clean each of their legs as to eat any residues. Answer: once I got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. Being male, I stood there, leaned forward, placed a hand on the wall in front of me, and started to go. I felt a tickle on my wall hand, so I turned on the light and saw a house centipede right next to said hand. I screamed like a little girl, ran from the bathroom, and didn't get back to sleep that night. They may be harmless, but they're pretty good nightmare fuel. Story 132. That the lady who sued McDonald's because her coffee was too hot was the bad guy. McDonald's ran a PR campaign against her to make sure we all believed it was just a petty Karen after money who was too stupid to know her coffee would be hot. To this day, people believe it. In reality, it was an elderly woman who suffered skin burns because the coffee was that hot. She sued for her medical expenses because she was sent the ER. There was zero indication that the coffee would cause actual fudge damage to her skin. Story 133. People would say never pick up a baby bird who has fallen out of the nest, or else the mother will smell humans and abandon the baby. It's not true. Put the baby back in the nest. Story 134. That baby carrots are coated in chlorine. They are rinsed in a diluted chlorine solution, then rinsed again, thoroughly, with potable water. The same goes for all pre-cut vegetables. Story 135. Stranger danger. You're much more likely to be eliminated, kidnapped, or abused by someone you or your parents know and trust. Story 136. The laws of physics say that helicopters shouldn't fly. False as fudge. Even Newton could explain it, if given just a nudge from Bernoulli. It's mostly simple first-year stuff. Anyone who says otherwise is ignorant. Answer: yeah, but according to all known laws of aviation, there is no way a bee should be able to fly. Its wings are too small to get its fat little body off the ground. The bee, of course, flies anyway, because bees don't care what humans think is impossible. Yellow, black, yellow, black, yellow, black, yellow, black. Oh, black and yellow. Let's shake it up little. Barry, breakfast is ready. Ming, hang on a second. Hello? Story 137. The whole William H. Taft got stuck in a bathtub at the White House because he was big thing is actually a complete myth. There's zero evidence that says that actually happened. Story 138. That piranhas are passing machines that'll reduce anything that moves to bones. In all actuality, they're just as apprehensive as any other fish, and swimming by a school of them will cause them to scatter. Piranhas are scavengers, not predators. Story 139. Tongues do not have separate, distinct taste regions. You have the same taste buds distributed throughout. Answer: I'm not sure why this pseudo-myth is so popular on Reddit, despite what keeps being perpetuated in those "what lies did your teacher tell you" threads. The tongue is divided into regions of taste preference: salty, sweet, etc. It's not all or none. but the tongue is divided into these segments based on the predominance of different types of taste buds. If you check Costanzo Physiology, very popular physiology book used in medical schools, it distinctly says there are regions of taste preference. Long story short, your elementary school teacher wasn't lying to you. Link to Costanzo. Source, 4th year medical student. Story 140. I'll go for something a little bit different. There's a myth about the tongue that's very popular on Reddit for some reason. Despite what keeps being perpetuated in those "what lies did your teacher tell you" threads, the tongue is divided into regions of taste preference, salty, sweet, etc. It's not all or none, but the tongue is divided into these segments based on the predominance of different types of taste buds. If you check Costanzo Physiology, very popular physiology book used in medical schools, it distinctly says there are regions of taste preference. Long story short, your elementary school teacher wasn't lying to you. Link to Costanzo. Source, 4th year medical student. Story 141. Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg were average Joes because they dropped out of college. Yes, they dropped out of Harvard. Story 142. That it will break your fridge if you put something in it that is still warm. It will just increase the fridge's electricity use and temporarily slightly warm up its inside. Story 143. My response is the fact that France stole the Mona Lisa. It was donated to France by Leonardo da Vinci because he died in France, and because he was a good friend with the king. Story 144. The false fun fact popularized even by Nat Geo that Lima, Peru, has a sculpture of Winnie the Pooh. It doesn't, as confirmed by Lyman's. They do have a Paddington sculpture, though. Story 145. The story about the Nova car model not selling in Spanish-speaking countries because it translates to "it won't go." That is some world-class pre-internet trolling, because I had that in my college textbook. Story 146. Growing up around my area, everyone believed Marilyn Manson removed some ribs so he could suck his own. No idea where this started, but I recall everyone believing it. Story 147. That sugar makes kids hyper, that you should wait 15 minutes after eating before you swim, that you shouldn't mix adult beverage and antibiotics. Only an issue with very few types of antibiotics. I recommend QI's General Ignorance segment for people who like this kind of stuff. Story 148. That a free market. A market that is unregulated. This is a fairly modern, ideologically politicized take and has absolutely nothing to do with classic or neoclassic economics. A free market needs to meet a number of pre-existing conditions to function efficiently. Market failures and distortions are very often caused by the actions of private entities and/or structural conditions. The overwhelming majority of economists, regardless of political affiliation or school of thought, believe that some government regulation is needed for a free market to function. Answer. Plus, all the work done in the mid to late 20th century in behavioral economics kind of blows up a lot of the basis that free market logic is based on. Biggest argument for a free market is that it is the optimal way to distribute resources. But this is dependent on people and organizations making rational choices. Thaler, Kahneman, Tversky, and a host of others demonstrated that not only are people irrational, but under certain circumstances, they are irrational in predictable ways. Now, not saying that a centrally planned is better. Too much real-world data shows that freer markets tend to work much better than the alternatives. However, the libertarian argument that it is optimal does not coincide with the modern understanding of human behavior. Story 149. That we evolved from monkeys. No, we actually both, us and monkeys, evolved from the same species, although I forgot what it was called. Story 150. Rats spread the black passing. They actually didn't. Recent studies discovered that rats may not actually be to blame for the 14th century plague. According to scientists at the University of Oslo, who conducted an experiment pertaining to the potential transmission routes for the deadly plague, discovered that the parasites that carried the disease were much more likely to have come from humans than rats. The model showing the disease spread by human fleas and lice matched the passing rates of the actual black passing much more closely than the model involving parasite-carrying rats. Answer. I saw that too. Wouldn't that be crazy? But it's still a controversial topic. It's not like we can go back in time and confirm it. Also, I think they only went over the black passing. All of the other Yersinia pestis epidemics spread a bit differently from that one. They spread slowly, instead of hopping from city to city. It still looked like a rat-flea migrations for most of the later epidemics. Some scientists think that during the Black Passing, there was a large amount of people who got anthrax, and that was adding to the weird migration pattern. Either way, it still looks like rats spread plague during most of the plague epidemics. Since the plague originated from the Taraboggan, it seems like rats are the most likely vector, given the info we have. Though who knows what we will find in the future. Story 151. The notion that you have to add oil to your spaghetti when you boil it. You don't need oil. Lots of salt is all you need. Story 152. A penny dropped from the top of the Empire State Building could eliminate you. It's been determined that a penny traveling at terminal velocity cannot penetrate concrete or asphalt. It won't cause serious damage to a person, and even at the speed of sound, will still not damage flesh. At most, it might sting a little. Story 153. Money doesn't bring happiness. If I had more money, I will be able to retire early and spend more time with the family. Story 154. That immigrants had their names changed when they came into the United States. If the names were changed, it was the person's decision to change it themselves. Story 155. You have more than 5 senses. Aristotle came up with that one, and like a lot of things he believed in, it was wrong. Story 156. Blue Monday. No, not the song by New Order. That's a real thing, it's brilliant. Blue Monday is a concept created by a holiday company as a PR stunt to drive up bookings. As it falls on the third Monday in January, it's a piece of pseudoscience that feel right. It's a time when the post-Xmas bills are flooding in. For the Western Hemisphere, the weather is chilly damp. The daylight is still short. Plus, if you've done dry January, you're dying for a brew. All BS. It's my personal bugbear. Story 157. You can see the Great Wall of China from space reason. NASA confirms that the Great Wall of China, frequently billed as the only man-made object visible from space, can't actually be seen from the final frontier. Although the fact was debunked by Chinese astronaut Yang Liwei, the textbooks were never changed and will often still claim this as true. Story 158. Apparently, a lot of people believe they can win last year's car model on Facebook because some schmuck posted a picture and calls it a contest. If they like the page and share it. Story 159. That dogs are black-white type colorblind. Yay, they see far less colors than us, but they can still see color. When kids are told their dog is colorblind, they assume this means poor Lucky can't see any colors in their drawing of a fairy they colored to show him. And this belief often doesn't change. It's annoying. Story 160. That you can't wash cast iron with soap. This was true 100 years ago when lye was a major component in household soaps. That is no longer the case. Dawn away. Story 161. Narcolepsy doesn't just make you fall asleep in the middle of standing up. It doesn't work that way. Story 162. I wouldn't say everyone, but I've still been asked for bills larger than 100. Those haven't been in circulation for a very long time. Story 163. The Myers-Briggs personality test is total pseudoscience bunk. You're not an INTJ any more than you're a Pisces. Story 164. That and MMR vaccination, measles, mumps, and rubella, typically given to young children, will cause autism. This lie has gotten so much traction that these diseases are making a comeback. Idiots in the making. Story 165. The belief of good or bad persons. Almost any image of a person is glorified or horrified. People seem to have problems with the concept of good people being morally wrong, ignoring that Gandhi was racist and misogynistic, or the other way around, that bad people were morally right at some times. People accept bad people being geniuses or factually right, but often deny that they can be morally right too. I don't know why we do this anymore. It makes sense evolutionary, but it makes absolutely no sense logically or empirically. It's a really dangerous and scary habit because it enforces conflict and division, and it makes people blind for arguments. At some point, all will turn ad hominem, eventually comparing others to Nazis while implying there is some kind of intrinsic inhumanity to them. Some people then even generalize this to groups of people. It's crazy. The other side of this is that people will agree with other people just because they like and trust them, not second-guessing anything. The thing is, most people will certainly agree that there is no absolutely bad or absolutely good person, but they will still believe in some kind of linear scale for good and evil, and that people are somewhere on there. That aside, there are many other beliefs a lot of people get wrong. Like, evolution is something that is aimed on improvement is a big one. All evolution says is, living things that recreate before dying pass over their genes, and this leads to evolving in relation to the circumstances of the environment at that time. Almost everything about advanced physics is also often wrong because it requires prior knowledge to comprehend, but we want a simple answer. Every other time when a statement is made like, X was the first to invent, discover Y, it's wrong. People neglect that progress builds on previous progress, and that there is often no clear line as to the state when an invention is the thing we claim it is. Therefore, there are almost always multiple contestants, and the book you read about it will choose either the most famous person or the one closest related to the country you live in, etc. Story 166. That Edison take down an elephant. 2 employees from his film company just taped other people doing it because they traveled around looking for novelties to film for early motion pictures. Story 167. That chewing gum stays in your system for 7 years. It's interesting because if you happen to swallow gum, it will not completely digest. It looks like gum when it comes out with your stool. It's still in gum form like it was when you swallowed it. Story 168. 8 glasses of water a day. It was a mistake between the 1,944 and 1,945 USDA nutrition guidelines. If you're thirsty, drink. Otherwise, don't, sweat it. Story 169. Any old wives' tale, really. If you go out with wet hair, you'll catch a cold. You can't get pregnant if you're breastfeeding. You can't swim 30 minutes after eating. Story 170. That if you exercise for 1 week and gain a few pounds, you gained muscle. That's not how any of this works. Story 171. Blair Witch Project. I was a young teen. Parents were out of the country. My 2 uncles take me to see the movie. The whole way there, one of them kept telling me, it's legit based on a real story. It was all over the internet. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well in my empty home that evening. LOL. Story 172. That chemicals are bad and natural is always better. An excellent example is in cosmetics. Natural products contain plant oils and extracts, and frequently essential oils which can cause irritation, inflammation, sensitization, chemical burns, and even phototoxic reactions. Furthermore, plant materials degrade and decompose, and thus they require robust and decidedly unnatural preservative systems to prevent nature from taking its course in the form of bacteria and mold. Natural is not categorically safer. Story 173. Women have a higher pain tolerance than men. It is simply untrue. Different people have different pain tolerances, regardless of intimacy. Story 174. That water boils at 212 F 100 C. This is only true at atmospheric pressure at sea level. As the pressure that the water is under increases, the boiling point of the water also increases. Story 175. I've seen some people online recently circulating the idea that Europeans didn't know how to bathe before colonizing the Americas and had to be taught by indigenous Americans. And the fact that people believe it is stunning. Story 176. Not exactly everyone, but the majority of Americans believe in free markets without understanding that the classical construction of that phrase, until about 20 years ago, always included market making, regulation, and taxation by the government. Joe Average likes to spout off that free markets always function better and that getting government involved is the problem. Without a ref to call the game, the rules quickly fall apart. Story 177. That sciences and proven facts can't be wrong. The truth is that most people never see how we get the results, and science is always changing. It was made for that. The closest thing we get to a definitive science is math, where a line was once considered that which is drawn by a ruler, and a ruler was defined as an object with a line for a side. None of the two are still accepted, but most other sciences are even more imprecise, simply because, plenty of time, we don't have what it takes to see things clearly. Check your facts, use the method, but be always open for change. Like with anti-gravity, that is a thing now, because sound waves apparently have negative mass. Story 178. A lot of people believe that the mass of a plant comes from the ground, as in the plant gets bigger due to it using material in the ground. However, the mass of a plant actually comes from the air, the carbon in it. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vancher. See you soon.